With the small scale multi unit housing initiative, or the Multiplex plan, coming into effect in the province of BC next month, that essentially automatically rezones single family lots to allow for multiple units to be built on them, many people are exploring what they can do with their properties. Investors are also looking at this as a new plan or a new way to potentially add a new style of revenue to their portfolios. This plan ultimately may create a lot of citizen developers who are looking to cash in by maximizing this potential new value in their land. But developing real estate, and especially in Vancouver, well, it's not that easy. And it has many nuances to understand and to navigate. To help share some insights into what developing multifamily projects in Vancouver is like, we have a special guest with us today, Mr. Clint Murphy. Clint has 25 years in finance and over a 15-year history within real estate, working for one of the largest developers in Vancouver and building a sizable real estate investment portfolio for himself. Clint is here to share more insights into his most recent endeavor, a development company with a focus on building the well-needed missing middle. If you are interested in how the multiplex plan will affect your property and our housing crisis as a whole, this episode is definitely for you. First off, Clint, welcome and thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me. I look forward to having a conversation with you.
Fantastic. Us too. So right off the top here, let's get a bit of context. Can you please share a bit of your real estate journey, sort of where you started and get us up to where you are today?
Absolutely. I first started investing in real estate personally with my own home back when pre-sales were just becoming a thing. So that would be 2004. We bought right on the edge of Yaletown. And we ultimately sold that when we moved out of the province, came back a number of years later and thought, holy crow, what's happened? We'll never be able to live in the city again. Luckily, in 2010, after the Olympics, for some reason, people thought no one would ever want to live in Olympic Village. You guys may not remember that. It was referred to as a ghost town, and the developers were blowing out units. And so we were lucky enough at the time to purchase a townhouse in Olympic Village for under $500 a square foot. And from a starting your journey on the right foot, that was the one investment that ultimately eventually led us to have enough capital through home equity lines of credit that we were able to make investments in real estate projects at work and also to start building a rental portfolio. So where we're at today, personally on that journey, we own 8 properties and have a 9th under contract that should close early 2026. Somewhere along there in 2010 actually was when I left KPMG, where I'd been on and off for about a decade, and started with West Group as a controller. Worked my way up there to director of finance, ultimately left West Group and ended up about 8 months later at Mosaic Homes. And I've been there for 10 and a half years, the last 8 of those as the CFO at Mosaic.
Wow, fantastic. A couple of great companies to work for. And you've definitely seen, the real estate landscape broaden here in Vancouver. And I will share that I actually do remember the ghost town that was Olympic Village. And yeah, they couldn't sell them if they wanted to. And that's
crazy. Just made
baffling
no sense
to people today looking at them at, 11 to 14 a foot today.
I received a call from 2 of my closest friends saying, we're worried that you're taking all this net worth or earnings, whatever you want to call it, that you've built up over time, and you're throwing it away on this investment. Meanwhile, I was thinking, can I have 5 of these?
Right.
I was looking at Science World, I was looking at the water, and I was wondering what I was missing. Like, what? How am I the crazy one in this equation? It just didn't make sense.
Well, sure. And even downtown at the time was probably trading at 800 a foot. You know what I mean? And it was a 5-minute walk away.
Just had to take the ferry across the water.
Yeah. Bit of a crystal ball that we all kind of had, but still, I guess it was a bit foggy, and only the brave took action. So congratulations, Clint. That's a nice foray and introduction into it. So let's talk multiplex here. Like, what is your take on this small scale multi-unit housing initiative in BC, and will it actually help the housing crisis in our province?
It's an interesting question because it for sure is better than just single family. So making it so that we can incent more people to add density is always a good thing. We need more dense, walkable, urban cities. The problem is it's not enough. Why are we incenting a 6 unit multiplex? And let's say we take 3 lots and we all of them multiplex it. So now we end up with 18 small apartments, and we could have, let's say, 20 2 and 3 bedroom townhomes. Like, where's the right play here? We're trying to make it so that more people can move to the city. We're incenting a new type of development. But again, we're not fully hitting the mark of where we should be on densification. Let's say wood frame apartment buildings, 6 stories, ideally with some commercial at the base around the most dense areas. Fraser, we're already seeing it in the Canby plan with some towers. Why don't we then go to townhouse instead of the multiplexes? Why don't we do something that allows more densification as we move down to the single family lot? That's my only problem with the multiplex is it's a step in the right direction, and it still feels like they're not going far enough.
Clint, if I can follow up a little bit on that, what would far enough look like in your mind? And just as we consider these things, and I largely agree. One thing I'm not sure we need more of is more condos. I think we
Yeah,
need more different housing asset classes for people that they can grow a family and that they don't necessarily have to move, from a 1 bedroom to a 2 bedroom to a 3 bedroom to a half duplex, where
that's
they
right.
make 5 moves and pay 5 loads of property transfer tax, which will eventually erode your wealth. I'm just trying to see here, what does that missing middle look like to you? And what would be going far enough? What would the policy really look like for good fundamental change?
You know what jumps out at me is a lot of people say when they travel to Europe, they go on vacation and they lose weight, and they're blown away by it because they're like, I ate all this great food and I lost weight. And they try to attribute it all to the fact that the Europeans don't let you put the stuff in your food that we do here in Canada and the US, right? That's part of it. It's a small part of it, right? Is better, more healthy food. The other part of it is those cities are walkable. Everywhere you go is generally like our Olympic Village. It's that level of density through the whole city. It's townhomes at the base, it's apartments above. It's you go to Quebec and you have this row after row of up down townhomes, right? So you've got the fourplexes, the eightplexes, 3 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, and so you have all of this different livability in very short sections, but you have it throughout the entire city. You have a good mix of cafes, shops, places that you can stop and grab a bite, meet up with your local friends and have a conversation. And so it makes these cities much more walkable and much more able to be crossed via bikes, cycling. So you see a lot bigger cycling culture over there. So if we're able to design the density in a way that affords that, with a mix of housing, I agree. We don't want to just see tower after tower with blocks and blocks apart, and then everything in between is single family or it's shopping. Like, let's get gentle densification, 4 to 6 story, mixed with row homes throughout the whole city so that you're able to walk through these vibrant urban neighborhoods.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. And I think a lot of people, they think because all their land has almost instantly been rezoned, that everybody's just sort of hit the land lottery, if you will. And that, of course, just because they're rezoned, that every property is worth more and that every area can suddenly be like this walkable city, like you said. And it's kind of the furthest thing from reality, if you will. And it's
Yeah.
going to be really interesting to see how it unfolds because, of course, some areas will do quite well, others won't. But, I think we are fielding a lot of questions now from people that are asking, well, what can I do with my land and how much can I sell it for just as is, et cetera. And of course, like I sort of alluded to, not every lot is going to see this great lift that everybody's expecting. You know what I mean? And even if they want to develop, well, some will be allowed to and some won't. And even on top of that, the ones that can, well, they're going to find out it's not an inexpensive endeavor.
Yeah.
So, kind of a broad question here, but who do you see, or which areas do you see as really benefiting the most from this initiative? And if you can, it's basically a provincially wide question. And
I can't name the areas exactly. I did have a conversation with a mutual friend, Bill, over lunch the other day. And what Bill was pointing out to me was that in Burnaby, Vancouver, and I believe he said the Tri-Cities, that you're able to take advantage of it. Whereas he listed a few other areas where they don't allow, for example, they may allow the multiplex, but they don't allow stratification of the units. So your ability to actually sell them at market value is restricted, which takes away the advantage that those municipalities would otherwise have. So if someone's listening, I think what they need to understand is two things. One, or maybe three. One, am I allowed to build it? Two, am I allowed to stratify it? Because for there to be true value, you have to be able to sell the end units as individual strata title. If you're only able to build it, but then you have to rent it out, that doesn't have the same value metric as being able to sell it. And then the third is, what is it going to cost you to build it? What is the fee structure? What is the cost structure in that municipality to be able to take advantage of it? The other thing a lot of people aren't looking at, and this is one of the challenges with the way everything's being approached by the government, is there seems to be sucking and blowing, right? We giveth and we taketh away. And so one thing people aren't necessarily thinking about, and we just sold a single family home, and one of the selling features we advertised was you can't actually build this home today. And the rationale is the city has said for single family homes, we're dropping your density to 0.6 FSR. So you're not, so we have, for example, our home's about 3,200 square feet exactly. If you wanted to replace this, you would only be allowed to build 2,400 square feet on this lot. So that is punitive. So when they're looking at the value, sure, you may be allowed multiplexes now, but you've taken out the ability to build the 3,000 square foot single family home. So in one way, you might say there's some value added, but it's only value added to that person who wants to build a multiplex. And I would say that person is in a minority to the person who 6 months ago would have bought your lot to build a single family home. Now they're not willing to pay you as much because they can't build the home that they could before.
Is the government's rationale behind that, though, that you're going to take down this house and build a new single family house, and that doesn't help our housing problem, one iota? And
yes, absolutely.
I understand the perspective, but I also think too, maybe one thing I would add to your list of three there is, just because you can, just because you're aware of the costs, just because you have an understanding maybe of the schedule, does that still mean you should do it? Because, my experience, before I was a realtor, I spent 9 years in construction, and I was a project manager. And I always tell people, for people who have never been in construction or gone through the process of construction, that it's largely like going to war with your enemy and not being able to kill them, right? So you have to go back, and duke this thing out for the next 9 months, and somebody is going to win or lose. And oftentimes, especially if you've not done this before, it can be very risky. So, I'm all for citizen developers, and I'm all for enabling this to take place, but it's not without its inherent risk. And, I think the government going one step to creating a policy where we can do these things is great, but then the incentive for the builders that are here, the amount of taxes they have to pay to actually get the project off the ground, the amount of capital required up front, all of it seems very prohibitive in sort of producing more supply for the areas that we need. I don't know if I sound like a broken record, but that's
No,
kind of my take.
you're absolutely accurate. The example I like to give is we've probably all heard that statement, Mike Tyson's former trainer, who said everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. As a developer, you're getting punched in the face every day. There's some kidney shots. There's a couple belly shots. And all of a sudden, there's 3 guys in the ring hitting you. And you're like, where's the punch coming from and who's throwing it and why? Why are you hitting me? And it's, I'll give you an example, Ryan. We have a site. It was our conversations with staff were going extremely well. Extremely well. We were excited. We were getting accepted into a program that would expedite the timeline by 1 to 2 years, similar to the initiative with the multiplexes here in Vancouver. The staff member who was working with us reached out to transportation for comment, and they replied back that they wanted a 13. So we're a corner lot, so 2 streets. So they wanted a 13-foot dedication on one of the streets and a 10-foot dedication on the other. So effectively 25 to 30% of our site. And then they responded, this will significantly impact their project. Have a great weekend. Like what? So there's 3 months, 5 months of work, probably 5 months of work dashed, right? Unless we're able to solve it, and we will. But there's months and months of work. There's $50,000+ invested. And then we get that comment that wasn't in any guidance that we could have found. Right.
And so I know too, like when you're building something very dense, like if you're building like a 200 or 300 unit tower, just the amount of money you have to put down in terms of city fees before you even put your concept to get approval is in the millions. And I don't think a lot of people appreciate this like level of risk that is required in an environment where now the margins are just getting thinner and thinner and thinner. And it's kind of getting scary.
We have a project. So as we build out our real estate development business, we will, during that time, partner with parties as a development manager, as fractional CFO work. So in ways that we're able to strategically help partner entities. And one of the groups we're working with, we're looking at a tower project for them. And if we put the land into the pro forma at appraised value, it's a 10% or lower margin. To actually make a pro forma that we would go on, let's say 15%, because it's high risk. Like at a minimum, we want that. At a minimum, we want to be able to finance that. And it's really 3 things that are killing you. The rise in construction costs, the interest rates are just killing you. In this case, they wouldn't even be, because we wouldn't necessarily need debt till construction start. If you or I are developing, we're buying that land and we're paying that bank loan generally during a 2 to 3 year land hold phase. Then we're under construction on that tower for 3 years. So you're 5 to 6 years before you get revenue, and you're putting all these costs out. And when you looked at it, the third thing was fees, right? You're paying for that density. And so when you look at it that way and you look at those 3 categories, unless you heavily discount that party's land, the pro forma doesn't work. And so if they're looking to partner, so if it's, let's give an example someone who's listening can use. If you own land and a developer comes to you, what they'll often say is, hey, you put the land in, I'll develop it, and we'll split the profit based on, the cash I put in, the value of the land you put in. But if you're putting in the land and now we had to drop it in value 50% to even get it financed, you've just cut out your share of the equity and therefore your share of the returns. It's just punitive. And so that person, if they can actually sell for appraised value, is better off selling for appraised value than developing that 200 plus unit tower that you just talked about. I mean, that's just backwards incentives.
Yeah, there was a talk quite recently by a developer, and they said one of the biggest risks in their book right now when it comes to development is the unknown potential change in fees that's going to take place over the time of their project. And I think we just saw two recent examples of this, right? We had obviously the Plex plan get pushed forward, and so people are thinking, great, affordability, step in the right direction, and it comes from a provincial level. But then at the municipal level, cities like Burnaby, for example, are like, great, well, we're just going to increase our fees as a tax grab. I believe it's to the tune of $50,000 per unit. So if you're trying to build a sixplex, well, guess what? You just went up 300 grand in costs to the city that basically just didn't even exist the day before, right? It's just a stroke of a pen and you owe this. Also, I've heard it was only as far or as recent as about 2015, where the township of Langley, I believe their cost per unit was around 4,000. Fast forward 9 years to today, the per unit cost is 24,000. They've 6x'd in just 9 years. And so it becomes so cost prohibitive to build, of course. And again, it was an unknown. And like you said, it's kind of that, sucking and blowing or giving and taking, and, one hand give, the other one takes. And it's just like, there's like no path to affordability when the second there's just an ounce of light there, the other side comes and says, great, that's ours. We'll take that.
And it's not just fees. It's changing code. So more fees, more requirements for energy, for the new one that you guys have probably talked to people on the show about is the new adaptability requirements that are coming out, that are going to require for wood frame apartment buildings that each home have a certain amount of adaptability built into it. And what this means is we have to build larger homes, or we have to significantly impact the square footage of the home and the layout in a way that reduces the value. And where does that go? I mean, that's the question that comes to people's minds. If you're increasing the costs, if you're increasing the fees, if you're increasing requirements, where ultimately does that cost go?
Do you know the answer, Clint? Because we don't.
The trick question. So I'm going to give a different answer than the average person because I think people are a bit wrong with when they say these costs are passed on to the consumer. Because at the end of the day, whether that cost was in there or not, we all know that the developer is going to sell the home for the fair market price, and that is the price that an arm's length party is willing to pay for that home. So if you're willing to pay me $1 million, I'm going to sell for $1 million. It doesn't matter if it cost me $900 or $875 or $720. So what happens when these costs go up? It's worse than the cost getting passed on to the buyer. The developer doesn't build.
I was going to say nothing.
Yes, the developer doesn't build. And so what you're seeing today is developers putting their pencil down. People wonder why the prices of homes haven't started dropping. And I always come back to something that Rob McCarthy, one of the principals at Mosaic, told me a long time ago. Banks don't have to lend. Landowners don't need to sell. And developers don't need to build. And the majority of the land in the city is owned by probably the top 8 to 10 developers. Sure, there might be 100 different developers out there, but the majority of the land is owned by a few of them. And so if they decide these fees and these costs are too high to build, they will simply reduce the amount they're building until the prices, because of supply and demand, go up to meet the price they need to build. So to that extent, hey, I just came full circle. But the prices do get passed on to the people.
It's interesting though, Clint, because I think that perspective too often will give developers a bad rap, and it's not the case. In fact, that would be no different than any other business in any other circumstance. If the margins are not worthwhile doing, you will not take on the risk and potentially forego your entire ability to build in the future because for the sole reason that the margins are thin. You just won't do that.
That's right.
And that's not at the fault of the developer. because there are other marketplaces where they will end up going to build where the margins are better or where the
Yeah.
city is not so prohibitive. So really, it comes down to policymakers creating an environment where building can be done. Because like you said, the other option they have is to restrict the actual buildable footprint that they own and increase the current resale value of properties to a point where they can create the margins again.
Yeah.
And that makes it more unaffordable for everybody, not the
That's
other
right.
way around.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So
I
we
think,
end
I
up,
think,
what do we end up with there? We end up with fewer homes built
mhm.
at a higher cost to the end consumer. I mean,
Yeah.
it's the worst of all worlds. And so, I look at it, and I'm a simple guy, right? I like to say that you go back to what Charlie Munger said, where if you want to know the behavior, show me the incentive. And the incentives aren't aligned with what they want.
Mhm.
If we want more affordable homes and we want lower rents, then we should be incenting the building
Yeah.
of affordable rental. How do you do that? You go to developers and you say, we'll give you high leverage loans at a low cost of fund, locked in for a decade, and the amortization's 50 years. Do you
Mhm.
want to build affordable rental for us? And almost all of us will say, we'll build affordable rental all day, every day. Let's do it. And they started to do that with RCFI, right? With the CMHC RCFI program. But the problem was too many developers said, yeah, that makes sense. Let's do it. And so what they did was they started to stick more requirements in. Oh, well, too many of you signed up for a good thing. So now we want more adaptability. We want higher energy requirements. You got to tick these boxes on transportation. We have a 21-point scoring system. When we first started this program, you needed 13 points. Now you need 19.
You know, it's so interesting you bring that up because I think it was Elon Musk not too long ago, um, talking that he's obviously a very controversial figure, especially around things like regulation. But if you're talking about getting somewhere and evolving at a speed and a pace to fix problems, we need some regulation for sure. Because
for sure.
so first of all, you don't want a wild wild west. That's a very bad situation too. But if you have some regulation, you put all the good operators on basically a super speed highway that allows them to go about building things, with not too much regulation, but guidelines, right?
Yeah.
But we've gotten to a point, and it's true of energy, especially in the energy sector, where it's so overregulated now that the ability to innovate is getting, encumbered because people can't get around the regulations, and we've got, a government regulation at every single level that's taking all of the incentive and all of the profit out of the other side of being innovative. And so, we need some level of regulation, but the amount that currently exists, in my opinion, is so prohibitive and so time consuming. We could be way further along if we maybe really thought about the incentive behind the building elements here.
When you think about that regulation aspect, Ryan, do you know, and I don't know if you ever talked about this on the show, where almost all of the largest home builders in the US, what state they come from?
No, I don't know.
Texas. What is
Doesn't
one of
surprise
the
me.
least regulated states in the United States of America?
Texas.
Texas. And they're not just building homes in Texas. They're building homes across the entire country. They started in Texas. So we like to think that it's our regulations that make someone behave properly. The free market will make people behave properly. If you build homes that fall apart or don't meet basic human needs, the market will not buy them. But if these companies start in a state that allows free enterprise and allows them to develop the systems and the processes that the market wants, and then they branch out from Texas and they go through the rest of the country. I was fascinated when I found out that statistic. So when you speak to regulation, yeah, you need a lot less than you think to create some pretty amazing things.
I tend to agree.
Yeah. Of course, yeah. The government's essentially trying to fix their own problems with ultimately more problems. And it's just going in this big circle that isn't working. And I mean, at this point, it feels like we're telling people just don't even bother. But Clint, what's your take? Like, are there some paths to success here for somebody who wants to build multi-units on a piece of land here?
It's interesting. We were talking about this in our partner meeting yesterday because one of the partners said, "Hey, I know some bright people who are doing this. Should we have this on our radar?" And the first thing me and one of the other partners said was, "Well, let's take a step back. Like, we're just starting the business. Let's nail townhomes. Let's get really good at that. Let's add in wood frame apartment buildings. Let's walk before we run. And every new thing we add into the mix is going to be something where we're distracting ourselves on that journey." And then the other thing we highlighted was there's two groups that you're generally going to see succeed with multiplex. Because if you're that person who's like, "Hey, I'm going to bang off 2 or 3 of these," and you don't actually know what you're doing, you're probably in for a world of hurt. Because there's that guy or gal who has a pickup truck, a ladder, knows some of the trades themselves, and has their friends, and they're driving their truck to the site. They're not charging fees. They're not covering overheads. They're just building 1 or 2 of these, and they're very good at what they do, and they're willing to pay a price less than you're willing to pay when you're trying to build in a pro forma, because their pro forma is a back of the napkin. They know the revenue, they know the cost, and they're not charging anything for their time. So those people will be successful. The other group that will be successful is people who do it at scale. So they're doing 20 of these in a small geographic area. So now they're not necessarily doing one multiplex or 2 or 3. They're turning it into a business. And they're saying, if I do 20 multiplexes in one area, that's the same as doing 3 townhouse projects. My trades are able to go from site to site to site because I'm in a certain geographic area. So I'm able to leverage that across these sites, and I'm able to get a flow of work. Those are the people you're competing with. So you're competing with some of the bigger shops who are deciding that they're going to throw a certain element of their team at this. And you're competing with the GC who normally does work for others, who says, "I'm going to build 2 or 3 of these at a time, or I'm going to build 2 or 3 of these a year, and that's how I'm going to make my living." So if you own a single family lot and you decide, "I'm going to do this myself," the type of person that you're going to call is probably the guy you're competing against. He's decided or they've decided that they're going to do it themselves. So I do think there are people who are going to win on the multiplex construction route. I don't know if it's your average mom and pop who have owned their house for 20, 30 years and are deciding, maybe I'll be a developer on the side. I think there's a lot of risk there. I don't think it's impossible. I mean, there are people you can hire that will help you do it. And the approval process, that's one of the reasons I think as well that some of these, if we take a step back, why would these larger shops want to do it? Instead of taking 2.5, 3 years to get to construction, or 4 to 5 years to completion, you're through a couple years faster. So you're through in 3 years to revenue. So the average homeowner, it might be more than they want to chew off. Might be more. Ryan mentioned the risk earlier. I mean, construction's not easy. I don't think that means they should completely erase the idea of doing it. You should talk to a professional. You should talk to someone who you could work with, understand the process, run the numbers, and if the return is sufficiently great enough to bear that risk, then do it. Otherwise, you may be better off just to sell to someone who's doing multiple of these and make some lift on your land.
Clint, can I ask a different perspective?
Yeah.
Because this is obviously for the benefit of the landowner and also the benefit of potential builders to that degree. What about the consumer? Does this policy in effect benefit the consumer in so much as that they're going to have a different asset class to choose, a different we kind of touched on the fact earlier that it's unlikely, because developers are putting their pencils down because things aren't just working right now, that they're not going to build. That is going to be a huge loss for the consumer. On the flip side, if we get a 200 basis point drop over the next 18 months, maybe we get the odd, surprise from our policymakers where we get a little bit less regulatory stance on things, or at the very least they become more cookie cutter. Is there a benefit to the consumer in that respect, or is that benefit still 10 years away because of the level of inventory that we need to actually ease the marketplace?
Well, it's both. The ultimate release of the tension on the system could be at least a decade away, because the amount of density we need to build to erase the gap that we have between the supply needed and the demand that's out there is too high. And so our ability to close that gap, unless we address things like how we're screening for immigration. So are we bringing in trades? Are we bringing in architects? Are we bringing in people to be on the tools? One, if we're not, then we may need to reduce immigration, which is a whole other conversation that you've probably had on the podcast. Because,
Yeah.
like, we need immigration to grow the economy. We're not a productive society, which is pretty bad in and of itself. So we need to increase productivity. We need to increase immigration to grow. But with that immigration, it's not right to bring people here if you don't have good jobs for them and you don't have homes for them to live in. So that's one thing, right? We would need to address that side. From the other side, anytime we give consumers choice, the consumer is better off. So what are their options today? There aren't that many.
No.
And the options are shrinking. And so if, when we talked earlier about I built my rental portfolio, one of the things I did in 2019 was I purchased 4 townhomes. And the reason I purchased 4 townhomes is I kept hearing our land guys say the amount of land that's available to build townhomes is disappearing. Within 10 years, townhome developers will go the way of single family home builders. If you go back 20 years, you could probably list 20 to 30 single family home builders. If you go today and I asked you in Vancouver, who are the single family home builders, you could probably list 2 to 3. I could probably list 2. Morningstar and Qualico. Like, that's all I know.
Say, yeah.
Right? Like,
Yeah.
And his point was that will be townhome builders a decade from now. And so if townhomes are gone and now all we have is condo, well, that's kind of shitty if you're a homeowner, right? Like, if you're a consumer and all your choices is condo for new product, then I look at that and I say this ability to do multiplexes, and you can get a 2-bed or you can get a 3-bed. It gives that optionality for a different type of living. I'm a big proponent of having, to your point, having that home. I mean, we're downsizing from a single family into a townhome. I looked at probably 1,000 townhomes across the city. There are very few that met the size requirements that I had for the family we have. 2 boys, my wife and I need an office. So you're looking at 3-bed and an office, or 4-bed.
Minimum.
There's very few townhome projects that offer that. So what is that family who wants something like that? What's their option? And so I think the more options we can give, the better it is for the consumer.
Yeah, absolutely. So talking more about, so that missing middle here, and obviously the landowner ultimately not going into loan as the risks are far too high. Is that where your new development company kind of comes into play?
100%. So we're predominantly developing on Vancouver Island. And in Victoria, they've developed an initiative for the missing middle. So they allow, if you fall within the missing middle program, they allow you to move through the process faster. And so the whole idea of the missing middle program that they've launched is the gentle densification of the city. So when I think of Frame Properties, which is our company, my partners had started this a number of years ago with one project and with a goal. And the whole goal was built around missing middle. I was able to join them over the last few months and to become a partner with them. And when I look at it, when we talk, we've been having conversations for 9 months. I just joined recently. The whole idea is, how do we serve that missing middle? How do we provide real homes for real people. We're not looking at luxury condo. We're looking at that townhouse that's going to be a place where a nurse or a firefighter or a police person or a teacher, you and I, where we're going to live with our families. And to your point, Ryan, you're going to buy it and you're going to live in it for a decade. You're going to live in it for 15 years as your family grows, and it's going to allow that optionality over time. The other idea with missing middle is it allows this densification in a gentle way. So our second project, as an example, is in a beautiful area in Victoria called Fernwood. We're 1 block away from Victoria High. We're 2 blocks away from the Fernwood Town Square, and it's predominantly all single family homes. I believe our townhouse project, when approved, would increase the amount of townhomes in that area by over 30% over the last 5 to 8 years, something along those lines. I'd have to double check the exact numbers, but that's pretty scary. You're adding 19 homes, 19
Yeah.
townhomes, and it's jumping up the stock of townhomes that much. It just tells you that in these traditionally single family areas, there isn't the optionality for that young family. So what we want to do is we want to come in, we want to offer two bed and flex space. We want to offer 3-bed. We want to offer 3-bed and flex space. So you go back to that exact size that I said I was looking for in the city. We want to be able to offer people that in Victoria. And we want to do it in a form that matches the neighborhood. So when you're walking through, you don't all of a sudden see this massive tower or 6-story wood frame apartment building next to single family. It's single family. Nice little townhouse project, well appointed, timeless design, right to another single family home. So that's the model we've been built on. We're focused on townhomes, and in the next few years, we'll also add wood frame apartments to the mix. Yes.
So, Clint, a quick question, just maybe provide some clarity here. When a developer buys a site and they go ahead and put a development plan together, and obviously they're working under the zoning or they're applying to rezone or something to that effect. Is it the developer who decides, hey, listen, guys, we're rezoning this. Our plan here is to build a ton of 1-bedrooms and 2-bedrooms. Or is it the city that comes back and says, no, we're not letting you build 1-bedrooms and 2-bedrooms? Because, the where I'm getting at is if you go to a place like Toronto, for example, they've got more condos listed now than they've ever had listed. And that was, I believe, a result of fueling demand in large parts that was speculative. A lot of people that were getting in, planning to buy, flip an assignment to somebody else, make $100,000 and move on. And developers were in turn responding to that level of demand. And I think it was a city policy decision that they could have gone a different direction and forced developers to say, hey, listen, this isn't sustainable, the kind of growth that or the asset class that you're putting together. I'd like to see 2, 3, and 4-bedroom homes. Please go back and resubmit. Is that something that the city has more authority on? Or is this something that the developer has to pioneer?
It's a combination. So I would say the first spot you start, and it may even be that we re-examine what we're doing on this second site based on the sales program at the first site. So generally as a developer, your number one source of what should we do is market acceptance, right? So we launched a townhome project. It was 80% 2-beds, 20% 3-beds. 200 people told us they wanted a 3-bed. 100 people told us they wanted a 2-bed. Oh, shit. Right?
Yeah,
That's
exactly.
not great. But that means that should inform project 2. It also may mean, and here's the problem, you look at Toronto and you say, well, they have more units than they've ever had, and that was based on a decision that was made at this point in time. One of the things that the realtor that we were having a conversation with today as we talked through this topic, and we talked about the mix on project 2, what he said was, well, wait a second, yeah, more people want 3-bed right now, but part of that is where we're at in the market. when the market's slow, when things aren't selling, when the prices aren't skyrocketing, and you're not getting multiple bids on everything, and you're not selling out a project in the first 2 weeks, people are going to ask for what they want, right? They're going to want that 3-bed. They're going to want that 3-bed and den. They're going to want the exact fixtures. They're going to want the exact finishes. As soon as, to your point, the market, the interest rates are down another 200 bips, the market's flying again, things are going off the shelf. That 2-bed and den, that looks really attractive because it's not moving up in price as much. And so at different times in the market, you're going to adjust your mix for what the market wants based on what's happening in the market at that point in time. And you have to have enough foresight to say, well, what will the market want 2 years from now? Because it's going to take you 2 years to get it approved. Then you've got to sell it. Then you got to build it. Yeah. The other aspect is the city. So you're going to go into the city with your development plan. Before you even go into the city, or concurrent to that, you're going through design panels, you're going through community meetings, you're getting input from the neighborhood, you're getting input from the people on the design panel, and then the city saying, hey, here's what we expect. And often in different municipalities, they require different things in their projects. So if you're building a tower, as an example, there's a minimum number of 3 beds they may require. There's a minimum number of 2 beds they may require. So yes, the municipalities will put minimums in, and they will strongly drive you to have a certain number of larger units. And, even as an example, I'll say how we did ourselves a disservice on the first application for the first project, which is going to construction in the next week, which, knock on wood, is super exciting. And that was, we had a 2-bed and flex, but that flex, which was on the ground floor, had its own door with a window in it to the outside. And technically in that municipality, that's allowed to be a 3rd bedroom. So we would have been smarter on our application to say we've got 12 or we've got 14 3-bedroom units. Instead, we've got four 3 beds and we have 12 2-bed and dens. We should have said 14 3-bedroom units.
Really goes to show as well, like how important even the configuration element of a project comes into play, right? Yeah, cool. I can build 6 units. Well, what's the square footage of each one? How many 1-beds and so forth? And again, I think really speaks to the fact of going it alone. We've probably terrified the crap out of some people here as to being like, that's not the path forward. But luckily, there are options, fortunately, like your company here with Frame. And while I'm sure we could, continue this on for hours more here with a lot more questions, I think we should wrap it up. But we definitely want to make sure that people know how to get a hold of you so they can ask more of these questions and potentially partner up, especially if they're in the Victoria area. So what's the best way to track you down?
Yeah, the best way is our website, which is frame.properties. Frame.properties. And if you want to reach out to me directly, you can reach out to me, clint@frame.properties, or you can hit me up on Twitter, where I'm very active as I am Clint Murphy.
Perfect. Well, we really, really appreciate your time and your insights today. Incredibly valuable. And of course, your history and experience within this industry clearly shines through here. And we really, really appreciate this. So we will be sure to add all of your contact information in the notes below here, and would love to probably have you back another time here because, this is going to evolve, over time here, over the years. And I think your insights into how it evolves would be greatly appreciated as well.
Love it. And as I get deeper and deeper into the development side and out of the finance side, I'll have more and more understanding of how it works, and look forward to sharing that with you guys in time.
Awesome. Thanks again. And
thank you.
Hopefully have you back soon. Bye.
Cheers.